An old man with dementia is nothing but a burden, I thought. The idea of spending my remaining years caring for someone in such a state was unbearable. I longed for a fresh start in a new home with a new partner. My mother-in-law, clearly determined to leave her husband behind, was ready to start anew despite his condition and the $3.3 million debt he carried. "I can't continue as his wife any longer," she declared. "You, on the other hand, seem to get along with him. Take care of his debt and look after him, will you?" With that, she left the house she had shared with him for many years, leaving me with a mixture of shock and loneliness. Seeing her leave so cheerfully was jarring. I approached my father-in-law, who stood quietly at the entrance. "Thank you, Tom, for always treating me with kindness," I said. "I appreciate that you consider me like your real daughter. As your daughter-in-law, I'll do everything I can. Let's work through this together." Despite my words, I was filled with uncertainty about how to support him and alleviate his suffering. Yet, I felt a strong resolve to encourage him and envision a brighter future. When I noticed his shoulders trembling, I leaned in, thinking he was crying. To my surprise, he was chuckling. "I've been waiting for her to leave for a long time," he said, catching me off guard. He began to share stories from the past and his plans for the future. "I'm Naomi, 42 years old, and I lead a vibrant life with my wonderful husband, Harry, and his loving parents. Originally from a small town in Chicago, I moved to New York for university and then dove into the IT industry. It was there that I met Harry, my calm and serious boss. As we grew closer, we began to envision a future together. We decided to marry, and I chose to live with Harry's warm family. Although I was initially nervous about living with his family, having been raised by just my mother, the challenges of dealing with my fertility issues made me yearn for a lively family life. My father-in-law, Tom, was the president of the company I used to work for. Harry, his son, had started from the bottom and was steadily climbing the ranks. It wasn't until we decided to marry that I realized Harry was the son of the company's top executive. After our wedding, I left my job, but Harry continued to rise through the ranks. He started questioning Tom's business policies and had ambitions to grow the company himself. As Tom aged, rumors spread that he might retire, and Harry seemed to be waiting for that moment. Despite his age, Tom remained energetic and eager to try new things. He recently expressed a desire to create a space in his home for the local community to relax, chat, enjoy tea, and share homemade meals. However, my mother-in-law was completely against this idea. Even though she was only 5 years younger than Tom and meticulously maintained her appearance, she wasn't great at housework. Their meals were mostly takeout, and they often hired professionals for cleaning. Their affluent lifestyle was supported by Tom's stable job, but with his impending retirement, their income would decrease. The prospect of having strangers in their home for the community space stressed my mother-in-law. Despite Tom's respect for her wishes, he couldn't give up on his dream. Consequently, the renovation project was postponed. In the end, Tom decided to step down due to health concerns. Harry was chosen as the next president, but instead of taking over all at once, he would gradually learn the ropes until he was ready for full responsibility. My mother-in-law had become increasingly distant from my father-in-law. Even when he appeared tired and worn out, she ignored him and offered no support. The tension in their home grew palpable as she struggled to support his dream, and their interactions became strained. When Harry first began taking over the business, he and his father maintained a close and communicative relationship. However, as Harry gained confidence in his role, his demeanor at home began to change. He started treating his father with the same coldness that his mother displayed. Tom began to voice concerns about Harry's behavior at the company. Despite Harry's enthusiasm for his work, Tom worried that his son's attitude towards his colleagues and the work environment was problematic. Tom once confided in me that he feared Harry might be too harsh with his subordinates. Having experienced my own parents' divorce and a limited relationship with my biological father, Tom holds a special place in my heart. He's always been warm yet self-disciplined, and I deeply respect him as if he were my own father. He also cares for me and has started to share his thoughts and feelings with me, which has made it all the more painful to witness the growing distance between him, my mother-in-law, and Harry. Both were stubborn and resistant to any attempts I made to encourage openness. Then, one day, my mother-in-law suggested a family meeting. She proposed selling their current house and building a new one. I was intrigued by how the family would respond. "There's an old house for sale next door," she said. It's a bit dated, but with some care and attention, it could become a beautiful home. We could even create a lovely space in the garden for everyone to enjoy." Her enthusiasm was a refreshing change from her usual reluctance. Tom's eyes lit up at the idea. "That sounds wonderful. We could definitely make a space in the garden for everyone to enjoy." Harry smiled and said, "If it makes you happy, I'm all for it." And so, plans for the new house began, with my mother-in-law taking the lead on the project. When I inquired about the progress of the new house, my mother-in-law confidently told me to leave it to her and not to interfere. She seemed to be communicating frequently with Harry, and I assumed things were going smoothly. However, I was stunned when I received shocking news. My father-in-law had accumulated a debt of $3.3 million. Despite his reputation as a seasoned business figure with substantial investment experience, his calm demeanor had concealed the scale of his financial troubles. My mother-in-law's first reaction was to worry about the future of the new house. Although my father-in-law tried to reassure her, saying, "Don't worry, everything will be all right. I'll sort it out," her anxiety was palpable. She began treating him even more coldly than before. One day, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, I overheard a hushed conversation between Harry and my mother-in-law. They were discussing the ownership of the new house, and I was shocked to learn that despite my father-in-law providing the funds, they were planning to proceed with the house under Harry's name without informing Tom. I couldn't believe they were making such a significant decision without involving him. "Aren't you both making decisions about such an important matter without including everyone? Shouldn't the whole family discuss this together?" My mother-in-law's response was sharp. "You know, Tom is showing his age, and there's also the debt issue. Besides, you've only recently joined this family. It's best if you just observe and stay quiet for now. The only person I truly rely on is Harry." Her blunt words stung, and Harry didn't offer much of a response. He had been so absorbed in his work lately that our time together as a couple had diminished. The only person I genuinely trusted and could confide in was my father-in-law. Yet recently he seemed different. Where he once was lively and busy, he now spent more time sitting on the couch, lost in thought. I suspected that my father-in-law might be troubled by his debts, but it seemed like there was something more going on. "Have we had dinner yet?" he suddenly asked as I was finishing up the dishes. "We just had hamburgers, salad, and soup together," I replied after a moment of thought. "Right, sorry about that," he said and retreated to his room. His forgetfulness was unusual, and it made me uneasy. I suggested that he see a doctor, but he dismissed it with a laugh, attributing it to fatigue. When I spoke with my mother-in-law, she remarked, "Tom's charm was his intelligence and his money. Without those, he's nothing." I also discussed it with Harry, but he seemed preoccupied with work. He mentioned that things felt off and that there was a need for timely leadership at the company. Amidst all this, I felt a deep sense of loneliness, as if no one in the family was genuinely concerned. I repeatedly urged my father-in-law to see a doctor, but he consistently refused. His condition seemed to worsen, and I took it upon myself to research dementia, trying various approaches and continuously persuading him to get help. "You must be having a hard time," my mother-in-law said with a sigh and a cold smile. "Tom isn't the man he used to be. Once Harry takes over the company, everything will be his. Isn't it only natural that Tom should have nothing left?" Her eyes were colder than I had ever seen, a look I had never encountered before. Her harsh words and the growing tension in the house left me feeling both surprised and anxious. With the atmosphere growing more strained, I hoped that moving to a new house would help refresh our spirits. Finally, the moving day arrived. We hired professionals to handle the large furniture while we took care of the smaller items. My mother-in-law provided specific instructions such as where to place each item, and we followed them carefully. The last items to be moved were the cherished belongings of my father-in-law and me. I returned to our old place to fetch my father-in-law when my mother-in-law appeared unexpectedly. "Thank you, everything is sorted now," she said. "Actually, I've arranged another moving destination for you as well." Her shocking revelation left me speechless. I stammered, "What do you mean?" She handed me a note with the address of a nearby flat. Seeing her smiling face, I was at a loss for words. She cheerfully explained, "The new house will be for me, Harry, and Ted to enjoy. So you and Tom should start fresh in your new place." I couldn't grasp what was happening. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't leave my father-in-law alone. As I prepared to leave, she added, "Well, Tom needs you now. Do your best for him. We can think about what comes next when the time is right." My mind was spinning with shock and confusion. Who was this Ted she mentioned? I could hardly think straight. How can you abandon Tom after all the years of support he's given to the family? I asked, my voice trembling. She laughed, absent-mindedly playing with her hair. "I want to enjoy my life too. I've taken care of Tom's needs, but daily life with him has become tedious. I want a fresh start with Ted." I couldn't believe her words. It seemed my mother-in-law was set on leaving her long supportive husband to pursue a new life with someone else. Tears welled up in my eyes. "So all your plans for a new life come at our expense?" With a glint in her eye, she replied, "Grow up a little. We all have the right to seek new beginnings. Besides, if people knew about Tom's $3.3 million debt, they'd reconsider too." For a moment, I was utterly speechless, struggling to process the gravity of her decision. I was stunned by my mother-in-law's audacity. Despite my shock and confusion, I knew I had to stay calm and handle the situation for my own sake. "You're saddled with a $3.3 million debt, and continuing this marriage is unfeasible," she said dismissively. "My husband seems to have a fondness for you, so you can manage the debt and take care of him." With that, she offloaded her responsibilities onto me and left the house without a second thought about the dire situation her husband was in. Watching her leave with such confidence, I was overwhelmed by a mix of shock and loneliness. After she departed, I approached my father-in-law, who stood dejectedly at the entrance. "Tom, thank you for always being so kind to me," I said softly. "I'm honored that you see me as your own daughter. I promise to do everything I can as your daughter-in-law. We'll face this together." Although I tried to comfort him, I was engulfed by anxiety, unsure how to support him and ease his suffering. Yet a deep desire to help the man I respected and to envision a brighter future for him filled my heart. As his shoulders began to tremble, I leaned in, worried that he might be crying. To my surprise, he was laughing uncontrollably. "I've been waiting for her to leave for a long time," he said, his laughter still echoing. His unexpected reaction left me stunned. He continued, "When she talked about wanting a new house, I saw it as an opportunity. She's so dependent on me that I hoped she'd ask for a divorce. I didn't expect to be kicked out of the house, though." I was dumbfounded by his revelation. His elaborate act had completely fooled me. Seeing the confusion on my face, Tom smiled gently. "Naomi, I'm sorry things turned out this way, but don't worry about the investment. Even if it goes wrong, we won't lose much. Now the real adventure begins." When we arrived at the new house, my mother-in-law was visibly upset. "Naomi, why did you bring Tom here? You two were supposed to move into a flat. Plus, my new boyfriend is coming tomorrow. Harry's taking over the business, so I need Tom's bank statements," she demanded, flustered. Tom, seemingly unaffected by her dismay, turned to her with a steely gaze. "I know you plan to enjoy your time with your new lover," he said, shifting the atmosphere dramatically. My mother-in-law was taken aback, and Harry stood silent, watching the confrontation unfold. "I've already transferred the ownership of this house to my name," my father-in-law said with a hint of apology. "It'll be difficult for you to stay here now." His words left my mother-in-law speechless, her eyes widening in disbelief. "But don't worry, I found a flat nearby for you. Enjoy your new life with your boyfriend. I'll cover the rent for the first few months," he added, his smile cold. Until that day, my father-in-law had always dealt with my mother-in-law's selfishness with patience and a smile. But now his eyes were sharp with anger, and his stern demeanor seemed to make her shrink. "I'm truly sorry," she said, her voice trembling as she fought back tears. "I was scared when I thought you had dementia, and when I heard about the $3.3 million debt, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. But I've always loved you. I never imagined it would end like this." Her words were filled with regret and desperation, but it was too late for apologies. My father-in-law chuckled bitterly. "The $3.3 million debt isn't as daunting as it seems. I married you for your vibrant spirit, not for your money. It's clear now that love isn't in your heart. I want to spend my remaining years in peace, and I don't want you here anymore. Please leave." Without even looking at her, he asked her to leave. Harry, stunned, gathered my mother-in-law's belongings and placed them by the door. He didn't want to abandon her, but seemed to be trying to make amends with his father, perhaps to protect his own interests. "What are you saying, Harry? Are you leaving me behind? Help me." Forgive me just one more time, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Ignoring her cries, my father-in-law and Harry walked into their new home. Her heartbreaking screams echoed in the tense atmosphere, but I followed them inside. Later, Harry made desperate attempts to reconcile with his father, but his work attitudes and interpersonal issues proved problematic. The company had another promising successor who had been performing well, and responsibilities were gradually being handed over to him. Consequently, my father-in-law entrusted the company to this new successor and stepped down as president. Harry, who had assumed he would naturally take over, was deeply shocked. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law began her new life in a small flat with her affair partner Ted. However, her new life didn't bring the happiness she had hoped for. Eventually, their relationship soured, leaving her alone once again. Concerned for her, I occasionally checked in on her. Her current state, far from her once glamorous days, was lonely and hard to witness. In contrast, my father-in-law and I began building a community space in our area. He provided the financial support, while I worked diligently to create a welcoming environment. The space became a local sensation, featured in magazines and online, and attracted many visitors. Riding this wave, we established an organization and expanded our activities. Harry, having left his previous job, now participates in our efforts. He used to be quite prideful, but through interactions with diverse people, I hope he becomes kinder and more compassionate. Together, we aim to fulfill Tom's dream and strengthen our community bonds, looking forward to many joyful days ahead.